Hi, my name is Tyler Duffy, and I'm the host of the Building the Bridges to a Better Future podcast. I was born and raised in Lacombe, Alberta, spending my formative years growing up on a buffalo ranch. After high school, I became a power engineer and spent 11 years working in the energy industry. I left that career behind and moved on to study a psychology degree at Red Deer Polytechnic. While completing that degree, I read one thing that stuck in my head that began to change my thinking, shape my beliefs, and ultimately guide my decisions from that point forward. The Canadian Mental Health Association had published some research that said that 80% of lifelong mental health issues have their root in early childhood trauma. Let me say that again. 80% of lifelong mental health issues have their root in early childhood trauma. Now that got me thinking. Does that mean that 80% of lifelong mental health issues are preventable? So research has shown that early childhood trauma is one of the major causes to lifelong mental health issues. So I feel, as a society, we should recognize that and implement programs to reduce, buffer, and eliminate early childhood trauma. Otherwise, we will never be taking a preventative approach to mental health issues. We will be locked in a perpetual process of reacting to mental health issues when they surface later on in life. Like the old saying goes, rather than mop up the bleeding, you gotta stop the bleeding. Now, this was new information to me, but professionals in psychology, education, and the social work world are well aware of this. And community leaders in Red Deer had started to create programs to address this issue by increasing the amount, variety, frequency, and quality of social support the kids get at critical stages in their social and emotional development. The hypothesis is that if we implement positive social support programs for youth and maintain them over years so that they become a permanent part of the Canadian culture, then it may be possible to turn the tide and begin a downward trend in the number of people that struggle with mental health issues in future generations. In this podcast, we will be interviewing the key people that created these programs and have worked tirelessly for 20 years to maintain them. The goal is to share what we've done in Red Deer, why we have done it, and how you can do the same in your community if you're passionate about taking a preventative approach to mental health as well. Come and check it out as we begin to build the bridges to create a better future. Okay, welcome back to the Building the Bridges to a Better Future podcast. My name's Tyler Duffy. My guest today is my old psychology instructor when I was doing my psychology degree at Red Deer College, Anomi Bearden, Dr. Anomi Bearden, I have to add now. So this podcast is all about highlighting different programs and different work that's being done in the Red Deer community, focusing on positive youth development, with the highlighting that 80% of lifelong mental health issues have their root in some sort of unresolved childhood trauma. So if you want to approach mental health from a preventative manner, you have to focus on that early childhood stage of development. If you wait until adults are having mental health issues and then try to solve them later in life, you've let the car fall down the cliff and now you're trying to fix it rather than making sure it stayed on track successfully. So that's kind of the message of this podcast. And today we're going to talk about a lot of the research that Anomi has done. How long have you worked here now?
This is year 18 for me here. So I've been here since 2008. Yeah, so just started my 18th year at RDP in September.
That lays down the framework for what we're talking about. Anomi, why don't you just give the audience a little introduction of who you are and what your passions are?
Okay, so some background on me. So I started my academic career in psychology here at it was Red Deer College at the time, in the year 2000. And I took the collaborative degree through the University of Calgary that we had here for over 25 years, where I had the University of Calgary degree, but got to stay here with the small classes the whole time. Then I did my master's in experimental social psychology at the University of Victoria, and my PhD also in experimental social psychology at the University of Calgary. And while I was finishing my PhD, this job came up. So for the first couple of years that I was here as a full-time instructor and researcher, I was also a full-time PhD student finishing my own schooling. So so I started here in 2008. I officially became Dr. Bearden in 2010 while I was already working here. So that's a little bit about the timeline. I am a faculty member in psychology here at RDP, Red Deer Polytechnic, we're called now. And my main courses that I tend to teach are social psychology, positive psychology. I've often taught the interdisciplinary mindfulness course on campus, interpersonal relationships, social influence and persuasion, more advanced social psych courses, and occasionally I teach a gender psychology course, gender and feminism. So those are the core kind of classes I tend to teach here. And over my 17 years here, I've also been involved in a lot of collaborative and applied research projects, and involved a lot of students in those initiatives as well. So I often involve students in community service learning, where they do volunteer work in the community, many of them working with youth, so I'll kind of touch on that. And I've done over 30, probably around 35 collaborative research projects, supervising student researchers, working with groups in the community, and usually internal and external collaborative partners like my colleagues here or in the counseling center here, as well as people in the surrounding community like the schools and those supporting mental health with youth. And a lot of the projects I've done have focused on well-being in youth and children, so those are the ones I'll highlight today when we're talking, but I've also done quite a few that were focused on other things. But
nice, yeah. If you've been involved in 35, obviously we're going to get to every one of those
Not
today.
talking about all of them today, don't worry. Only going to highlight about 10 of those.
Yeah, but that's one thing that is kind of interesting about this research institution, because when I was back here doing my psychology, which I finished in 2012, I worked with Dr. Greg Wells on 2 independent research projects, and it sounds like there's a lot of those going on.
Yes.
All the time. So the 2 that I worked on were on cross-age peer mentorship to see if younger kids benefit from the opportunity to be mentored by older kids. So we had high school kids, trained them on how to be a mentor, and then they went to the classroom of grade 5 kids once a week for 12 weeks to deliver this curriculum, and bada bing, bada boom, we found all sorts of positive results. But yeah, let's
And I remember when you were here doing that project with Greg, and Greg is one of the people that I know you've interviewed for this podcast, and I'll mention him throughout because I've also collaborated with him on a variety of things. We share some collaborative partners in common.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited. So why don't you start off? Let's go to the questions here. First one, because I've been preaching this is the 9th or whatever episode now, but can you talk about how, from your perspective, how important positive youth development is to resilience and long-term mental health later in life?
Yeah, for sure. So first I want to focus on the positive part of that. So as someone who teaches positive psychology and likes to apply positive psychology in a variety of contexts, just kind of giving people some background on what positive psychology is. So the field was created by Dr. Martin Seligman and Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, and it spans across areas of psychology, and it's just about, are you focusing on balancing out the field? Because our psychology has a long history of focusing on the negative and what's wrong with people, and studying individual weaknesses and environmental stressors and problems. And of course that's important if you're going to help people and try to understand helping them through that. But positive psychology over the last 30 or 40 years has focused a lot on balancing out the discipline. It's gained a lot of speed over the last 20 years or so, and a lot more research based, and focusing on what's right with people as well, and what would happen if we studied what was right with people and promoted what was right with people, and balanced out the discipline by not only focusing on individual weaknesses and environmental stressors, but also focusing on individual strengths and environmental resources and building those. And so grounding it kind of in positive psych, there are pillars of positive psychology that enable individuals, families, and communities to thrive. And a lot of things get studied in the field across those pillars, and their PERMA is how you summarize it. And it's positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning, and achievement, PERMA. And then they added V, vitality, so that's PERMA V, but because physical health is important too. To get more specifically at youth and positive youth development, an approach to positive youth development really focuses on how youth have resources and are resources that can be cultivated and nurtured and developed for the betterment of everybody, right? And the focus is on fostering the 6 C's in youth for positive youth development. And those are competence, confidence, connection, character, caring, and contribution. There are also resiliency programs for all kinds of people, but a lot that target youth. And they focus on building mental toughness and fostering strong relationships, and then also increasing character strengths or enhancing character strengths or assets. One of which programs is being used a lot in our community right now by Spark, which I'll talk about them later, but they really highlight the Search Institute's developmental assets, and it's a strengths-based approach, building assets. And something I love about their approach to strengths-based approaches is it's not just building individual character strengths, it's also focusing on the external or the environmental and the social forces. And as a social psychologist, I don't want us to forget about those. But also a lot more research is showing the importance of social connection and community and social relationship for resilience for youth. So it's great that there are both internal and external factors with the Search Institute's developmental assets. They also really heavily focus on developmental relationship. Another thing I'll emphasize here is there has been some research looking into particularly youth who've been exposed to a great deal of trauma and have gone through some really heavy stuff in their lives and what enables them to thrive anyways. So researchers have looked at youth who've gone through horrific things and have still somehow come through strong and resilient, and what is it that allows them to be that way? And they summarized the factors that they discovered in this research to their ability to find a nurturing or caring adult in their life, even if that's not their parent or caregiver, the ability to build good social and communication skills, having at least one close friend that they can really count on, having creative outlets and hobbies that they can turn to in difficult times and to help them process their emotions and escape, having a sense of optimism and hope and holding on to that despite really dark times, and also showing good signs of executive functioning like impulse control and emotion regulation and behavioral inhibition to help buffer them against addiction and things like that. More recent research since then has focused even more heavily not on what characteristics do those people have, but what's around them, and more, again, that emphasis on community and relationship and the importance of that, and youth engagement and involvement in community, like you mentioned with the peer mentorship work that you were doing, like getting them involved and engaged, doing something positive in the community can be really, really good for them, as well as having strong positive ties and connections with friends, with teachers, with peers, with neighbors, and having them threaded through the community and engaged and involved more within it, and also civic engagement, volunteerism, getting them active and giving them voice and empowerment. And the last thing I'll mention about, because I told you my answers would not be short to the questions. The last thing I'll mention is there is a training that a lot of professionals are taking lately called Brain Story. And it's all about how to build resilience, and especially focused on like trauma sensitivity and how to build resilience in brains. But brains are housed in people, and people are housed in relationship. And so they focus on something called the resilience scale. And how do we tip the favor? And they use images to help us understand this, but how do we tip the scale in our favor for resilience and thriving? And the 3 main things they tend to focus on, just to kind of simplify their approach, is building responsive relationships, so something they called serve and return, and that secure attachment and connection being there. Developing core life skills, and so they refer to this also as building your executive function things like I mentioned, impulse control, emotion regulation, things like that, and reducing sources of stress. And that could be just, building extra supports in the community or the environment, but also mitigating significant sources of stress on people. So they also look at fostering resilience in communities and looking at what supports and stressors are in place and how they're being mitigated in the communities. So that's really cool, I thought, too, is some kind of recent work that's happening with that. And that is all I have for that question, because I could have added more, but you did advise me that there is a time to these. So that's what I'll say for the positive youth development piece and the research. Not that I've done, but that I'm familiar with in that area, before we speak more specifically about my own stuff. Yeah.
Awesome. That's super interesting. So how, is that like research in the last decade kind of thing? Or is that, when is this research happening?
The brain story stuff is more recent. I believe they're more in the last decade, but they are based on a development of research that's been going on for quite some time. That was just an overview of sort of the research in positive psychology that I'm aware of. I think most of it has probably been over 20 to 30 years' time. But as I said, a lot more recent focus has been on not just building strong individuals, but that real importance of the individuals embedded in relationships and connections and community, and really making sure that that's a heavy emphasis as well, not just what can you build in the person.
Yeah. I'm going to kind of rabbit hole a little bit here, but tell me if this resonates with you at all, because I remember when I was doing my psychology degree, and you're taking a variety of courses, sociology and anthropology courses and stuff like that, and I kind of came to this conclusion where I was like, so 99% of our evolutionary history was kind of in hunter-gatherer tribes-ish sort of thing, right? And then, as the agricultural revolution happened, and then the industrial revolution, we've kind of fractured away into like smaller and smaller, now we're into single family units. And I feel like that might be a contributing factor to a lack of connection a little bit, right? Because
I think there's probably
does that resonate with you at all?
I think there's probably a lot of contributing factors to the lack of connection and like the loneliness epidemic that's happening these days. And we're even seeing with post-secondary students, they're more hesitant to like make friends in class or do group work and group discussions and group projects. And and I think part of that is remnant even just of more recent, COVID and everything online and needing to isolate and all of that, even though that seems like it's a distant past. It also, times are different now since, and I don't think we've found sort of a new normal, not to use that language, but for sure, I do think there's a lot of contributing factors. And when you add in more individualistic societies or approaches or, and more disconnection in neighborhoods, we saw very few trick-or-treaters in Halloween the other day, just, thinking back to the times when, tons of kids were out there and everyone was going to the neighbors and everyone was socializing and friendly, and we didn't see that in our neighborhood this year. And so I wonder if that's even part of, just this isolation and disconnection and lack of social engagement that we're seeing. And I do think there's a lot going on, but I agree that it's a need to kind of offset it and intentionally focus on relationship and connection and engagement and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. This is, based on reading lots of different research and then kind of drawing conclusions on it, right?
For sure.
But I do feel like it appears to me, like I'm talking about changes over centuries, right?
Yeah.
It feels like the support group over centuries has gotten smaller.
And that could be the case too. I'm just hesitant because I feel like it depends on what society you're talking about too.
This is specifically Western.
I mean, although I've taken
societies.
courses on evolutionary psychology and I do see its importance and relevance here and there, I am a social psychologist, and so I'm going to focus more on social and cultural and more immediate social phenomena, just by nature of how my brain is wired. I don't doubt that there are evolutionary things happening as well there, but but the way we often see it with that is with evolutionary psychology provides a distal explanation. And that doesn't mean that there aren't also more proximal explanations. So, evolutionary psych is like the why behind the whys, but why? But why? You get back to because when we evolved to live in social groups, right? And but there's also more immediate things that they're having impact, and it doesn't mean that those aren't also part of the picture or an answer, but both can be true. So that's kind of how I look at that, and I think a variety of things are happening distally and proximately to feed into what's going on. Yeah.
I agree there. I think there's more things happening than we have the conscious ability to perceive.
Exactly.
All right, so let's bounce to question number 2.
Sounds good.
Or I guess we're on to number 3.
Yes.
So let's dig into the research that you have been involved with in your time here. So, with your career here at Red Deer Polytechnic, tell us about the research you have been involved with in the field of positive youth development, and what have been the findings of that research?
Yeah, for sure. So, as I mentioned, I've supervised 35 of these independent research projects of students, and then involved other, research students and sometimes community service learning students in it. But I'm not going to talk about all of those because they weren't all pertaining to positive youth development.
Maybe the top 3.
Well, I actually have 10.
10, let's
but
go.
I will talk briefly about each of them, and then maybe if there are follow-up questions or probes after that, we can dig deeper if needed, if there's time. So back in 2008, 2009, I started collaborating with some people around positive youth development projects in the community. And one of the first ones was the Under My Skin body image play.
I remember that one.
Yeah, and so it was delivered to grade 7s in our community. And since it was created in 2009, over 9,000 students in our community and our region have received that play as part of their curriculum. There's a video version of it, okay. So it's not still touring in the same sense, and students used to get bused to them as well. But it is still having impact in the community, and I believe middle school students are still getting exposed to that. So I was involved in the initial team that helped to inform its development, and I also helped out with its initial evaluation with some research, qualitative research. And I supervised a couple of students who were working on that. Danielle Bustamante and Reina Becker were involved as students at the time. And it's a big collaborative team, so I'm not taking credit for the play by any means. Tanya Riga, who was in our theater program here at the time, really headed it up. I know they borrowed a lot from But Ugly, which was a theater program that has already been in our community for anti-smoking, and there's a team that have helped inform from that. Denise Ferdine worked on it, the head of Move Your Mood program.
What were the findings of that?
Well, we did find that it had positive impact when we evaluated it at the time. So it was qualitative research, so we did focus groups, and the students, even when we went in weeks later, certain messages that we were hoping would stick with them from the play did stick with them, and they did say that it changed the way they thought about certain things or even some of their health behaviors since being exposed to the play. So we got some pretty cool quotes and themes from them at the time.
I remember I did some of that.
Yes, and you helped with it at the time. And then the other thing is, I think just the impact, not just of that evaluation, but just the fact that it's reached over 9,000 students in our community now and has been alive and well in our community since is, I think, a win in its own right. Ready for the second one?
Let's go number 2.
So then around 2010 to 2011, and you'll remember this too because you were also here at the time and helped with this one as well. I supervised a research student, Shelley Stratulet, on we were having students, community service learning students who were doing volunteer work as part of their courses, deliver mental health programming in our elementary schools in our region, and about 30 classrooms across 13 schools. Over 750 students were involved in receiving this mental health programming. They were delivering the Be Kind to Yourself and Others mental health kit activities. Not all of them, just 6 of them on physical activity, nutrition, body image, stress management, bullying, and pro-social behavior and friendship. And so I had these groups of students going off into classrooms, elementary classrooms, and delivering the mental health kit activities. The mental health kit itself was created by Edmonton Public and Catholic Schools, Canadian Mental Health Association, and Alberta Health Services. And there are activities as well as handouts and guides for teachers and take-home activities for parents for all grades, all like K to 12. But there's like separate chunks for different age groups. So we had the elementary one, and they were delivering it. And as I said, over 750 grade 4 students in our region were exposed to that across public and Catholic schools, and received the mental health activities in their classes. And then also had a research student evaluating that, and some volunteer research assistants helping too. Another big collaborative team, again, it wasn't just me. So Dr. Scott Audie was involved in that again. We also got some advice and consultation from Denise Ferdine again. Others in Alberta Health Services, Kathy White, Shelley Dallas-Smith, Shelley Cooper. Again, really positive findings, and it was qualitative too, where students...
Can you outline some of those findings?
Yeah.
And qualitatives aren't quite as...
Yeah, students were mentioning that, you know, they were getting the key learning objectives and learning outcomes of the lessons and absorbing those and speaking to those, and they were showing understanding of some of the core concepts and terms that were taught to them.
Can you tell us about what those things they were learning were?
Well, because
core learning objectives?
I want to talk about 10 projects, Tyler. So I had a really short overview of the 10, plus this one was 15 years ago. So it's not super fresh.
Fair.
But like I said, the lessons were physical activity, nutrition, body image, stress management, bullying, friendship. So each of those, because the kit itself has learning outcomes for each of those lessons. We actually had open-ended questions that the students were asking the kids involved about, you know, certain concepts and learning objectives that were in those lessons. I mean, it would take the rest of my whole interview to go through the 6 lessons, and this is like older work I just wanted to mention and kind of get to the more like recent stuff. But what we did find overall is that they were absorbing the learning activity, the learning objectives intended. And we also got positive feedback from teachers. We tried to get positive feedback from parents, or to collect feedback from parents, but they didn't send their stuff back in, and the teacher responses were really low too. We only got the materials back from the teachers for like 5 different teachers, because we know they're really busy. So we focused more on the feedback we got from kids, because we got feedback from about 300 of the 750 kids.
Nice.
And themed it, and it was overwhelmingly positive that the activities were well received, and that they enjoyed them, and that they actually picked up some of the things we were hoping they would pick up from them, is the basic findings of those, without getting too granular on theming 300 and so responses in depth. I didn't bring quotes with me or anything from that.
Okay, number 4 we're on.
Number 3.
Number 3.
I got 10 left to get there. In about 2012-2013 academic year, I supervised a student, Shanna Engert, on a project called the Physical Activity Leadership Program, or PAL. We summarized it as PAL, Physical Activity Leadership. It was funded by the Primary Care Network. Again, we had a big collaborative team, so Dr. Scott Audie was involved again, a former faculty member here and was the health research chair at the time. Denise Ferdine helped with this as well. You're noticing a theme. I've collaborated a lot with her, the creator of Move Your Mood, and I won't stop talking about her yet. Mark Jones was involved, who also started this Central Alberta Child Advocacy Center, and I got to work with him on that back then. Rob Waddell, a kinesiology instructor here. Others from the Primary Care Network and Alberta Health Services were involved as well. And basically the Primary Care Network funded the purchasing of athletic equipment for a whole bunch of schools, partly to level the playing field, because there are schools that were underfunded and stocked for athletic equipment. And so PCN bought all these schools a whole bunch of athletic equipment back then. We also had money from the PCN to hire kinesiology students as PALs, physical activity leaders. They would go into the schools and build capacity and work with teachers and kids to help increase engagement in physical activity and enjoyment of physical activity. We noticed that a lot of teachers, it was kind of a mixed bag, how many of them really enjoyed teaching that part or had expertise on that part. So it helped to kind of build the quality of physical activity instruction in the schools at the time. What we did find, it was more quantitative, so we're not talking about a lot of quotes and themes this time. We did measure pre and post the kids' self-efficacy, attitudes towards physical activity, and motivation to engage in physical activity, all of which were found to significantly increase from pre to post before the program came into the schools and after the program left. So the kids evidenced increased physical activity, self-efficacy, more positive attitudes towards physical activity, and greater motivation to engage in physical activity. And that research has been published in Psychology in the Schools and has been presented at international education conference as well.
Nice.
Yeah, and so that one was really cool.
And what
number 4.
Yeah, let's go with number 4.
I told you, like, I'm gonna try and stay on time, but I have a lot. I mean, this is my 18th year here, so I've done a lot of stuff, Tyler.
Yeah. So actually, before we bounce into the next one, so are you aware of that program being taken on and
continued in some fashion?
Continued or adopted in other communities, kind of thing? And
I am not aware of it being adopted in other communities. I do think that it helped to foster some partnership between the schools and like the kinesiology department and Denise Friedian with Move Your Mood. And, you know, a lot of these early on projects, I feel like helped to bolster just the communication and collaboration and connection between people working on these things and streamline it more. And I think that's part of the reason why you'll see, not only have I already mentioned some of the same people multiple times, but some of them were on a lot of these projects with me because we're in a fairly small community. And it's really easy for people, like-minded people with shared passions, to find each other and to work together. And that's something that's really amazing about our community and why I think we do it so well. And so I think that, you know, not only us at RDP, but, you know, people in AHS, in the schools, the PCN, like, and I know you've talked to some of these folks, it's kind of easy for us to find each other and work together, and we almost can't stop doing it at this point. And so I think even if that program didn't persist or continue, because I'm not aware of it doing so, I think some of the lasting impact, and that's also why I was kind of like, well, I don't want to get super granular about exact findings in depth necessarily for some of these, especially the older ones that are not as fresh for me. But I also think for me, some of the impact is less about the specific research findings and more about you know, it's a bonus so that, you know, some of them got published and presented at international conferences and stuff like that for you know, academic contributions. It's good to see that disseminated, but I think the main benefit of a lot of these is the collaboration itself and the community building and capacity building itself, and the fact that people find each other and work together and build connection and continue doing that, and where does it go, right? And the fact that that continues to kind of ripple through our community and the way we do our jobs and the impact that it has, I think that, if anything, is a huge, you know, benefit of just being involved in any of these kind of collaborative projects, is it sort of changes the way you think about your work and how you understand other people's work and how you can connect what you're doing to what they're doing and bring your strengths together to make a little bit of an impact where you can. And so that's partly why I love this applied work, you know, in its own right, you know. And then of course it's great when you have positive research findings, and it's great when you can publish them. But yeah, I think it starts relationships and collaborations that continue on. And I don't know that I've been able to measure exactly what that looks like, but I think it's kind of an immeasurable thing, right?
Yeah, and if you get different organizations in the community work now the way that they integrate and cooperate and work together is changed forever moving forward.
Exactly.
That's the win.
And because you've seen that and you've been part of that.
A win.
Exactly. And because you've seen that and been part of it and been engaged in it and you know, worked with these people on these kinds of projects, it's partly what lit your passion for doing this and wanting to kind of showcase it, right? Is that you see it's kind of special what we do in our community and how we're able to do that. And that's one of the huge benefits of being at a smaller kind of community college type of environment is you can really embed yourself in the community and work with the community. So, and your students, connect them with the community. So I see that as the major win, right? So should I get to number 4?
Let's go number 4.
All right. I promise a brief overview for each one, but you can always pause and ask more. Okay, so the fourth one I wanted to talk about, 2017 to 2018, when SPARK was formed in our community, which is a coalition that stands for Strengthening Positive Assets and Resiliency in the Community. It was formed by co-chairs Rania Page and Denise Verdeen, who I'm sure you've spoken to on this podcast. Big players in youth development, positive youth development in our community. When they started that SPARK coalition, I joined it and I supervised a student, Brooklyn Moe, at the time, who helped with the initial implementation, design, and evaluation of their Simple Connections, Stronger Families events. And the first 2 big events that they had at JH Daw and the Collicut, I had a bunch of community service learning students getting volunteer hours, manning the tables, doing activities with parents and families and kids, you know, around all kinds of things like gratitude and mindfulness, heart math, you know, play games. There's a fun, you know, picture station where you dress up and get a fun picture together. There's a family. There's all these different things at the different tables, and families get a passport. They go around and stamp, and they try all the different fun things together and learn about the developmental assets and how what they're doing is helping to build developmental assets. And then they win prizes at the end. Since then, SPARK has done multiple events like this every single year. They're also involved in lots of other initiatives in the community. And it also led to quite a few of my students and former students like participating in SPARK, volunteering on SPARK, and that kind of thing. And so that collaborative team I mentioned is Denise Verdeen and Rania Page, the co-chairs of SPARK. And then a lot of like CLWs, community liaison workers in the schools, and people from Alberta Health Services. There's usually someone from the RCMP on the committee. I feel guilty because I rarely can make their meetings work for my schedule, but I technically am still a volunteer on the community and I help where I can. But even like aside from the research findings, coming back to the impact of it, not only did we find that the events helped to raise awareness and educate about developmental assets for kids and for parents, and gave them some helpful tools and everything, but my student that year who was working on it, right out of that got a job as a community liaison worker in the schools, and it was partly because she was on the radar because she had done relevant work and she was known by the right people in the community. And so that's another reason why I really value doing this applied collaborative work is students, whether they're volunteers or research students, or they learn to collaborate and connect with others, but it also leads to opportunities. Like the right people know who they are, and they build some skills that help them get opportunities where they want to go. So there was that one.
Yeah.
I'm halfway through now. I'm at number 5.
All right. This is great. I'm loving it because this is, all...
Make your job a little easier, just
2012,
listing them all off.
Yeah. 2012, I finished a psychology degree, did that research with Greg, and then bounced into the film world. So it's good to see that...
What's been happening since?
Because, Denise and Rania and a lot of those people I worked with back then.
Yeah.
And everybody is just going. Like it's not...
Yeah.
It's not a theme that the community has like dipped its toe in.
Yeah.
And been like, oh yeah, that was good, but it's like we're head first.
Exactly, and that's what I think is exciting about it too, is like, yes, the individual research projects are great. They give students great experience to get into competitive grad schools or competitive jobs and network in the community. But it also fosters this collaboration, and it's continued on. So I thought, yeah, that is exciting for you to see that a lot of those early on people that were collaborating back when you were here as a student many years ago when I was fairly young and new here, you know, they're still going on, and we're still collaborating in lots of different ways. So another one was in 2018, and I supervised a student, Cassandra Curtis, who's now on our city council.
Oh, wow. Look at her go.
And she did an in-depth literature review and synthesis on the youth strategy collective impact. So she was looking at best practices in youth civic engagement to help inform the work of the Youth Advisory Council of the time. And so she sat on the Youth Advisory Council, she consulted people, she dipped into the research and the literature as much as she could to pull out important information for them to share with them to help inform their best practices and the success of the committee. Dr. Greg Wells was the second reader on that project for her. She worked with Constable Derek Turner, who was also on Spark at the time, working on community engagement. Shelley Dallas Smith, who was in health promotion at AHS, she's also helped with a lot of the other ones I've mentioned. Avery Aitchison was involved at the time, and Danielle Fortin, and there were others as well. And she presented her findings back to them. So even though that didn't generate like data or findings of our own research as an in-depth literature review, and didn't get like published in a journal or anything, that's another example of just that dissemination still happens when she shared her findings back to them and informed their work and improved their work through that evidence-based kind of approach. Mm-hmm. So some of the projects have looked a little bit more like that.
That's just on that avenue, the literature reviews I find are absolutely fascinating.
Yeah,
and that's where, you know, like, because a lot of stuff, research gets published and stuff like that, and you know, I asked you the question about, you know, about these programs being adopted in other communities, but you don't know.
Yeah.
But when I did with that cross-age peer mentorship, I did course credit and did a literature review. So for like 2 months, all I did was read published literature on what programs and methods have been effective, and that was what kind of put us on that cross-age peer mentorship, right? So that's kind of one of the cool things about research is, you know, it does have a positive impact because other people, like research builds on research and stuff like that, and other people are referencing it and stuff. Mm-hmm. So it does have a positive impact, but it's hard for you to know it is.
Sometimes, yeah. But that's why the applied work is great, is like I said, it's a bonus when it gets published or presented at a conference, and it's great to engage in the academic, you know, field and growth of the knowledge that way, and that's an important piece. But for me and my students, I think the most important piece is that when it's applied and it's community research, it has impact right now.
Yes.
On who you're working with and what you're doing, and you share your findings with them right now. And you take what's in the research and you translate it into, you know, knowledge translation, where you take it and you make sense of it for people with the skills that you have to dig into that research and to understand it, and the skills that the students have built to do that. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, sometimes it does look like, and I have a few other ones in here that are short and simple, that are just literature reviews and synthesis, and we have those students when it's on an applied thing, go into not only the peer-reviewed academic research on whatever that is, and really wrap their head around it and become kind of experts on whatever it is, but they also go into kind of gray literature where we see, find what programs you can find even on websites and stuff. Who's doing stuff, and what are they doing, and have they evaluated it, and what is it based on, and can that inform what we're doing here? And so often when we have students do an in-depth literature review and synthesis that is informing work in the community or work of a program, that's what they do, is they pull not only the evidence from the research and the strong research base and recommendations from that, and they can show where your program's aligning with it, but where they might recommend that you could strengthen or improve it, but also what are other people doing, and get ideas from that, and have they evaluated it? And so it is cool to see students kind of go out and pull that all together. And that's what we tell them, is you learn to write so many research papers as a student. And you think, why am I doing this? And why are you making me write so many papers? And I've already written papers. I've already showed you I can write. But we want students to get so good at it that then they can use those skills to inform, you know, programs and inform the community, and to have impact, and just see the why this matters, that you can do this, that you can go out and find all of this evidence and research on something and understand the best practices in a certain area and use it to inform what's happening here now. And the work of people who, even if they have the skills, do they have the time to go out there and find and read all of that research. And that research is really expensive to access for a lot of community members that students have free access to right now when they're students.
True, yes.
And so not only do they have the skills and the free access to the resources and the time if they're getting course credit for it, but that, the community partners can really benefit from someone really bringing all that information together and presenting it back to them. So it's always part of these projects that the students present the findings back to whoever we're working with or whoever could use that knowledge right now. And that's the real immediate dissemination and the real immediate impact that matters. And then if or when I ever have time around our heavy teaching schedules, I go try to publish it afterwards, and some of it does.
Yes.
Or go present it at conferences, and occasionally students come with me to present it at conferences, and that's cool too.
Yeah.
So that's a win as well, and I'm not downplaying that, but the big impact is in real time right now with who you're collaborating with when you get to do this research that you're working with people right now on something that matters to them and the work that they're doing right now, and you can deliver that back to them in real time. That's great.
Yeah, I agree, absolutely.
Yeah.
And this is just a question. So, because there's whatever, I reviewed 70 some papers were in my references, right? There was some of the research for that I would say changed me forever.
Yeah.
Like some of the things that I learned, right? And whoever that person, like I'm not going to go into what it was because that would take us way off track, but whoever did that research, they have no idea, right?
Yeah. And that's the thing too.
Like they don't get a notification being like, hey, Tyler Duffy read your research and it changed his life forever, right? Like,
exactly. And that's the thing too, like you say, sometimes you don't know all those little ripples of impact that go out and how far they go and where they reach. And you just have to know they're happening and trust in that. And even if you can focus on the ones you can see, that's really meaningful and rewarding in its own right. But you're right, a lot of them you can't even see how far it reaches or where it goes. But that's partly what's really cool about it. And then you have these cool things happen. Like I had someone in one of my, because now I've been here, it's my 18th year, I'm getting old, Tyler. I had someone in my psych class come up to me one year and say, I was one of those grade 4 students that your students came and taught mental health lessons to, and I remember that, and it really impacted me. It made me want to take psych, and now I'm here and I'm a psych student, right? And not only did that make me feel old, but it also warmed my heart. No, it also was like, that's great, right? That there was an impact that was memorable in a way that I didn't get to see or measure necessarily long term. And it's really cool to remind yourself that that's happening too, and you don't always get to measure or see that part, but
yeah, for sure. And with that Nights in Training program, because that literature review informed the Nights in Training program, and then that program's been happening for 15 years now. I did the math on it. Over 20,000 grade 5 kids have participated from that. And it's all from things that I pulled out of that literature interview, being like, somebody tried this and that and this, and it worked. So let's do it here, and then what, yada yada yada. And one of the cool things I love about that is it ongoing in the community. So when I'm walking around town and I see some high school kid or whatever walking around, and he's got his Nights in Training shirt on, sort of thing. Every single year that the conference happens, somebody, because you know how Facebook algorithm works. Every single year after it happens, something pops up about my kid just went to the Nights in Training program and absolutely loved it. Yada, yada. So that's cool to see. Anyways, moving on to number 5.
Number 6 now.
6 now.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
We got halfway. We got halfway through. Yeah, we're number 6. So in 2019-2020, me and a colleague, Dr. Stephen Brown, co-supervised a student, Sana van Oostrom, and we looked at implementing heart math, emotion regulation skills, practices into grade 5 classrooms and evaluating the effects of that. This is another quantitative one where we had pre-post. They practiced a heart lock-in, which is like a little mini loving kindness where you're radiating love and compassion to yourself and to others for 5 minutes as part of the practice. They practiced that for 5 minutes a day, 5 days a week for 4 weeks in school. We train the teachers. I'm a certified heart math trainer. So is Denise Ferdine, who, surprise, surprise, she was part of this project as well.
Yep.
As was Brooklyn Moe, who I mentioned, who was on the Spark project as a research student, but now in her role as a CLW, she participated. That's the other cool thing. That's not the first time that's happened. Got to collaborate with former students as they go off and work in the community, and now I'm doing research with them, or they're supervising or hiring students. Anyways, and so we had them do 5 minutes of the heart lock-in daily for 4 weeks. Pre-post measures, we looked at their heart rate variability. We also had a few different scales about emotion regulation and stuff. We did find a significant shift on their resting heart rate variability, which is a psychophysiological predictor of resilience, mental and physical resilience, and it's a strong predictor of resilience. It's being studied a lot in the research lately. And we significantly changed it in only 5 minutes of practice daily for 4 weeks, which is major. A lot of times you find significant results to take root on baseline, like neuroplastic change has to happen, right? So usually it's a longer practice and for a longer time frame. So 5 minutes a day for 4 weeks is promising for anyone who wants a short, sweet practice that works. So we also found that the kids reported all kinds of benefits for their emotion regulation, and they reported, and it was mixed methods. We had some qualitative stuff from them too, quotes and stuff. It was funny because that when we said heart math, even though it's an emotion regulation practice, kind of like mindfulness, the principal was like, so is it going to help them with math, right? And we were like, maybe, like we were really researching that. But the kids did report using it on their math sheets and doing better in math. So we were like, yes, we can tell them that. They reported using it to take a break and breathe and do some practice to help regulate their emotions if they were fighting with their siblings. So I'm sure parents appreciated that. They were using it to help them sleep at night. They were using it to help them before sports and athletic stuff that they were doing. They were using it before tests. So even though they were guided through it for 5 minutes a day at the same time by teachers at school, at the end of the study, they reported using it in all kinds of settings and really liking it and using it on their own for emotion regulation. So that was really cool to see. So it was really cute when they said, we used it on our math sheets. And we were like, there you go, it did help with math.
That's like, sorry to interrupt, but that's like one of the best stories I've ever heard about teaching someone to fish rather than giving them a fish.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's a something that they took, and now it's a tool that they have in their skill set that they can use whenever it feels right for them, right? You know what I mean? So that's a fascinating one. I would love to read that.
Oh, it was
read
really
more
cool.
about that.
Well, I can send it to you because it was published as well in a peer-reviewed
absolutely.
journal in Psychology in the Schools, and it also was presented at an international academic conference for education research, and it was grade 5 classes, and so it was a really cool one too. And you notice the year that was 2019 to 2020. So we
what happened next?
We had our pre-post tests. And our 4 weeks of practice, because it's usually in the winter terms when our students are collecting data for those projects, as you know. And our post-test data collection date was March 13th, 2020.
I can't remember.
That was
like
Friday
right
the 13th.
Yeah.
They made the call that all the schools were closed due to COVID on the 15th, which was Sunday, and we were not back Monday. So the last, and we had planned that in advance, and it was like, whew, like the last possible day that we could get in the schools with the kids and do the testing, we were there and we got it. And if we hadn't got in that day, that time, we would not have our post-test measures, and it would have went up in smoke. So we were like just by the skin of our teeth, like we just barely made it. So that also feels like a little bit of a win there, just in its own right.
Yeah.
And if you like the heart math emotion regulation stuff, it leads really seamlessly into my number 7. See, we're just flipping along now.
It's almost like you planned that.
It's almost like I planned it. And that's actually this year. So this year I'm supervising a student, Ashley Gillespie, and we're working with Stephen Roberts, who's a counselor in our counseling, he's a therapist in our counseling center at RDP. And he uses heart math practices a lot with athletes and with coaching and with student athletes and in his counseling work. And so he really wanted to do something with athletes. So we have 2 teams on board. We have the male and female teams for the AAA youth under 18 competitive hockey leagues. I don't know if I'm saying that right, because I am not the athlete in the group. I am the heart math researcher and guider. I'm a certified heart math trainer. So that one's really cool. We're going to do 5 minutes a day for 5 weeks. Data collection will be January, February 2026. We're going to look at, sport anxiety, perfectionism, self-compassion, burnout, resilience, emotion regulation skills, and heart rate variability. And we're going to see if we move the needle on any of those things pre and post as the coaches help us get the teams to practice 5 minutes a day for 5 weeks. So that's going to be this year.
So is that kind of the same skill, or call it intervention or whatever, as the last one, but just at a different target audience now?
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah, and last year we did our CMP officers, but because that wasn't youth, I left it out. But we had some really good findings with our CMP officers who were practicing heart math as well. And I just spilled my water all over myself, but that happens, and I don't care if you don't cut it out. It happens in front of classes all day long. So many people have seen it. So yeah, that heart math is the same practice that we're going to do.
Cool.
Yeah, they have a variety of practices, but I focus on the one partly because I love it the most, because it's like loving kindness. It's got the social psych element because you're radiating the love to others as well and outwards. But also the heart lock-in, that particular practice is believed by the Institute of Heart Math to be the most powerful for rewiring a new baseline physiologically in terms of where you're hanging out in your body and balancing the branches of the autonomic nervous system. So you're not just in your sympathetic fight and flight all the time, but you're bringing in that parasympathetic rest and digest, engaging it enough to balance out the nervous system activity and bring yourself into more of a calm yet alert state. And so that state is called coherence by the Institute of Heart Math. And so the practice facilitates, establishing a new baseline and getting to a new resting place where not even when you're practicing, but just while you're hanging out in your body, you're just in a more balanced place in your nervous system. And so that's really cool about it. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're hoping that helps with the athletes and the stress that they're under, and I guess
and what age were those athletes?
They're under 18, so
under
I think
18,
everybody in the team's like 15 to 17. Some of them might be turning 18 or almost turning 18 during the study. Are you ready for number 8?
Let's go, number 8. Yeah, this just gets
See, I summarized the ideas because I knew I had a lot. And this is kind of going back, but also present, continued. So this is bringing back, I've mentioned Denise Verdeen a whole bunch of times because I've worked with her on vast majority of the projects that I'm mentioning today. Mm-hmm. So she was in health promotion with Alberta Health Services. It's turned into Recovery Alberta. She created the Move Your Mood program, as you know, that's thriving in our community. Yeah, and she was really involved in that, the Go Girls, and still is. And she's done a lot of amazing things. She also co-chairs SPARK, the Strengthening Positive Assets and Resilience in the Community. Denise and I met early on when I got here in 2008 or 2009 and have been doing work together since then. She also started back then, as you know, working with Dr. Greg Wells on some stuff, my colleague and your former supervisor, who you've also interviewed, and Dr. Scott Audie, who's another former colleague. He used to teach me when I was a student here, is how seasoned he is at doing this. He would probably love that I just called him out on that. But in 2024, Dr. Greg Wells and I co-supervised a student, Jocelyn Winnichuk, who conducted a thorough literature review and synthesis as a summer research studentship. She got paid for that. And that was pulling all of the research together for, the evidence base behind the Move Your Mood program and its pillars, because it has expanded beyond physical activity and now includes, practice mindfulness and fuel your body and nutrition and expand your mind and creativity, gratitude, like all these different kinds of practices, as well as the physical activity. And every session incorporates all of those pillars and all of those things. And so now with those pillars of wellness, I've had not only students work with Denise on expanding those and developing further programs and activities to put into it, but Jocelyn also did that in-depth literature review and synthesis, just showing how much evidence base there is backing those pillars of Move Your Mood, and the why the program is developed the way that it is, and the fact that it is grounded in some pretty strong evidence and research. So that was kind of a cool one too.
Nice,
but
yeah.
that one's still alive. Move Your Mood collaboration is still alive and well and ongoing.
It's great to hear that one spread too, because that's the kind of the goal of this podcast is to be share it. If there's people in other communities that are motivated to try and help youth in their community but don't know what to do, whatever, then here's some ideas.
Yeah, and so like Spark, the Spark coalition that Denise co-chairs with Rania Page also is in a variety of communities, and Move Your Mood's in a variety of communities, and you can see these things kind of spreading, right? And then also that partnership still thriving and alive and well. Every single term, Greg and I have people, students doing volunteer work with Denise through Move Your Mood, or helping with it, or helping to invest in and facilitate spin-off programs. Now there's a Move Your Mood for college students that we've had students involved in helping Denise create. There's a Move Your Mood program for seniors that Greg is helping Denise with and has students working on. There's Move Your Mood for new mums. It started with youth, and it focuses most heavily on youth, and that is where it's the most prolific, and it's really grown. But now there's all these offshoots, not only in our own community, but other communities are taking it up, and that's really exciting, because Move Your Mood itself started with a partnership between Denise in her role at AHS and with RDP and our faculty and students here wanting to support that work. And so it's really cool to see how it's not only thriving and continuing, but expanding and doing really, really well. And I know Greg has a student right now this year working on a research project with Denise. So
nice.
Yeah.
I would love to see the Nights in Training or the Grow Kids program event starting to happen in other communities. Like the positive benefit from that is both measurable and immeasurable. Like there's some things about it you can measure, but there's some things that are just outside of that are anyways.
For sure.
So where are we at now?
We're getting close. We're getting close. I'm on number 9.
Nice.
And this was just this past summer. I mentioned Jocelyn Winnichuk, who did the in-depth literature review and synthesis for Denise Verdeen last summer in 2024. This past 2025 summer, she was hired again under my supervision and Dr. Greg Wells' co-supervision again. To work on an in-depth literature review and synthesis that was helping to inform the development of a new program in our community that is being launched soon, I believe. It's called Thrive, and you'll love this one. It's a theater program.
Yes, it's come through my brain. I'm not intimately aware of it, but
it's a theater program for youth mental health. And it does involve a peer mentorship component as well, where the older kids who do the improv and the theater activities and everything come and then teach some of the things that they've learned back to younger kids. So that's part of that mentorship, peer mentorship, cross-age peer mentorship is part of it. It's being developed by the Treehouse Youth Theatre. So Alberta's Coet is the main one working on that. He's got others working on it, like Amy Erlinson, who's a former student of ours too in the psych program here. They've consulted and collaborated with the PCN, with Denise Verdeen, and with others in the community. I told you I'd be mentioning her. She's everywhere. She's everywhere. And so they're working on that program and designing it and getting prepared to launch it. So so that project was pulling a whole bunch of research and evidence base together to try to help back not only the evidence behind what they're doing and planning on doing, but make sure that it's really strong and solid, and that there's any suggestions that could strengthen it also in there. And so those results were shared back to them, to their team in August. Yeah.
And can we dip our toes in what those results were, or is that data being analyzed?
So
is that
because
opening
that
up
was
a can of worms that's going to go?
Because that was an in-depth literature review and synthesis, it wasn't collecting and analyzing data on people, because the program hasn't been launched yet. So it's just to inform the development and launch of the program, and to help it be even more evidence-based and even stronger. So what it was like a 40 or 50 page in-depth literature review with multiple kind of pockets to it, demonstrating the researched benefits for mental health, specifically for anxiety and depression, because that's what they're focusing on more for youth, of engaging in theater games, improv, theater-related activities. She also pulled in some of the background research around the benefits of peer mentorship and older kids coming in and mentoring younger kids, and some of the benefits not only for those being mentored, but the mentors as well as the mentees, and how everyone wins and benefits from that. So it was more looking into what she knew about the program and what she could find in the research about that, right? Yeah. Some of it also just looked into other artistic and creative expressions for mental health and programs that involve some of that. But then there was more of a focus on theater, since it is a theater-based program that's going to involve a lot of improv and theater games and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So the findings were just basically that the full literature review was shared with the team that's developing the program. An executive summary document that's a shortened version, kind of a Coles Notes if you don't want 50 pages, like a 10-page version of like, hit the key elements for me. Yeah. We always have students do an executive summary on these projects as well, so that we can send the community partners involved the 50 or 60 page paper. Sometimes it's as much as 75 pages, but usually it's 50 or 60 pages. As well as a 10 to 15 page executive summary, Coles Notes for people who need it. And then they also always develop an oral presentation with PowerPoint slides and visuals, and or a poster with visuals and a summary. And so multiple modalities of presenting the findings back to who we're working with. Gotcha. Impact of the work that our partners are doing in the community and the reach that it has.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Love it. Well, we got number 10, and then I'd like to talk about a little bit briefly about the 40 developmental assets, and that's our
sounds great. I mean, I told you when we were talking, like, I'd have no problem filling the airtime. I mean, not only do I get paid to talk all day, but I've been here a long time and done a lot of things with a lot of people, and I'm excited to talk about it. And so, I mean, yeah, I'm glad that you're giving me some airtime to do this. So the 10th one, I was debating whether I include this or not, but I thought it maybe should be included. And this is the fact that, what's our definition of youth, and where does that line get drawn? And at the college, Polytechnic, sorry, we're a Polytechnic now, at the institution, we have people start as young as 17. We have dual credit students who are still in high school taking some of our courses and getting credit for it, who might even be younger than that. A lot of people start their degree at 17, 18. We do have mature students and adults. We have a very mixed bag of what age looks like here for our students. But we do, I would say, teach and serve quite a few what I would call youth, if they're 17, 18, or youth transitioning into early adulthood. And there's this kind of transitional time even there of, when do you label them an actual adult and when has that happened? So a lot of people focus on like that transitional period from like the K-12 system into college and university and more independence, and all of a sudden you're an adult and you're treated very differently by your teachers and by everybody, and you're expected to be independent and all self-manage your time and everything. And so this transitional time has been researched quite a bit. And also, another at-risk period for people for mental health issues and stuff is that, late adolescence, young adulthood transitional time, right? Mm-hmm. So we do see a lot of issues, mental health problems, and a bit of a mental health crisis going on right now with post-secondary students. And so I thought it should be worth including that, since around 2013 or 2014, all the way until today, I've also helped and supervised students who've helped with a wide variety of projects. And so some examples of that, the Mindful You peer support program was designed, implemented, launched, and evaluated by applied study students and research students that I was supervising, and it's predominantly run by community service learning volunteer students in our classes who get trained to be peer mentors. So back to the peer mentorship, and say you have a 3rd or 4th year student who can mentor this young student coming in who's transitioning and finding it bumpy or challenging or lonely, there's a place to go. And Mindful U has puppy rooms and massage days and games and all of these different things, but they also teach mindfulness and heart math and emotion regulation. And they also have peer mentorship sessions, one-on-one and group, where you can go see a more senior student. And it helps to alleviate some of the strain on the support services on campus, because the counseling center students are reporting like long lineups or wait times or that kind of thing. And so they really help to mitigate some of that. It's a first point you can go to get some support and some advice, quality support and advice, and that those peer mentors are trained to know where their boundaries and limits are and to refer to the counseling center or to appropriate supports where they need more. So that's great. That's running on campus and is thriving, and it's been on campus for a few years and found really positive, results of that. That's published too and has been presented at international conferences. And the Recovery on Campus initiative that's getting underway and gaining speed here was also an applied study psychology student, really keen on that and passionate about that, who also created a job for herself and ended up getting hired to continue running it after she graduated. So you see, where does this stuff go? A lot of places. Also had a couple of students, Dr. Jamie Prost-Turner and I co-supervised a couple of students who helped collect information from students around barriers, belongingness, connection, supports on campus, their experiences with that, good, bad, and the ugly, to help feed into the hands of people who need it, right? Mm-hmm. Who are responsible for mental health on campus, like Tanya Lyons-Belt and Christine Plastow, who were able to develop a really comprehensive mental health strategy on campus that they recently launched, that was informed by student feedback and student perspectives. And a piece of that work was done by the students that we supervised as researchers on campus as well. And so yeah, lots of mental health and well-being initiatives on campus for students and supporting their success and their transitions. And I would say that some of them probably fall into the youth category.
Yep, I would agree.
So that's why I wasn't sure whether.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree, because it's everybody kind of I don't know if matures is the right word, but develops at different rates, right? Like, it's not like we all go through the same social and emotional changes according to a certain structure. It's like zones of proximal development, and so yeah, I absolutely agree. And that one's very cool. I like that one. So I'm glad you touched on that one and included that one, because it lines up with anytime someone is going through a change and who their support group is going to be, that's a risk factor.
Exactly.
Right? If they're not able to successfully find and build a new support group when they go through a big change, like, okay, now you've moved out of the city you used to live in, and all of your friends have moved on to different things, and now you're living in a new city with whole different people. If you can't successfully find and build a new support group in there, that's going to be a challenge.
Exactly. Yeah, and it can be even more challenging.
That one sounds gold.
Yeah, it's amazing. And it can be even more challenging, like you said, for people from small towns who move here to go to school and they're away from their community and their family.
Out of country, even as well, right?
Yeah, I was just going there.
Students.
International students, and they use the program quite a bit and have found it to be a safe space from what we can tell so far. I mean, we need to increase the awareness on campus about the program and the access of the program. Certain events are more popular than others, like the puppy rooms seem to really draw the crowd.
I would never leave the puppy room. I'm like, just send my instructors here, teach me here.
Yeah, but then they can use the puppy room as a place to say, while you're playing with puppies, just so you know, we offer all of these other supports and resources, and if you ever need us, we're here. And now you know where the space is, you know it's a safe one, and you know who is here for you. And so, whatever brings them in to get that message there, I guess. And so, there was a variety of projects in there over the years, but just another, I think, important more internal collaboration within our community here on campus that mirrors some of the external collaborative work that's kind of a similar flavor, right?
Nice.
Yeah. So I thank you for your patience. I got through 10 things. So that's not an exhaustive list, but that I think does a pretty good job highlighting, the vast majority of the work since I've been in this role here that I've been able to get involved in myself anyways, and involve my students in with internal and external collaborative partners that focus on building resilience and well-being and mental health in youth. So
beautiful. I love it. Well, I think we're gonna have to call that good. That's about all that we have time for. So
that's fine.
But that was perfect. A lot of people that I've talked to in this podcast have talked about the 40 developmental assets.
Yes, and I thought that might be the case, and so I had some stuff about them, but I mentioned them earlier, and I know Denise and Rania would have talked about them, and probably other people. So
it's also it's something that there's a lot of information to talk about there, so I might have to make that one. It's like, this is our 40 development. This is our episode for the 40
Even
developmental
just get Rania
assets.
to do a whole thing, because she's trained by the Search Institute to train people on the 40 developmental assets.
That might be a focus.
She's the most passionate, knowledgeable person I know in our community about the 40 developmental assets. So I think, you could just do a whole thing on those.
Beautiful. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Bearden. I appreciate it. It's good to reconnect.
Yeah, for sure.
And chat. There's a lot of really interesting things that I learned in there. Last thing would be, if any of this information inspired people, where can they find it more? Is that an answerable question?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think, so if people want to look more into Move Your Mood, there is a Move Your Mood website. I think it's just moveyourmood.ca. I have it written down somewhere here. If people want to look into the Spark Institute, it's sparkreddeer.ca. If you want to look into those, there is information online about the Under My Skin body image play, as well as the Be Kind to Yourself and Others mental health kit resources and activities that are ready to go that teachers can use at any time. If people want to know more about the research and the research findings and read up on that, or get the papers sent their way or anything like that, email me, anomi.bearden@rdpolytech.ca.
Perfect.
And you can search me on RDP and find my contact information there, and I'm happy to chat with people and always happy to collaborate. As you can see, I like to do a lot of that. And it's not just students and faculty and people in relevant jobs in the community who are involved. Like, Spark Red Deer is a volunteer coalition. There are parents that are involved that volunteer on it. Sure, some of the people are in jobs where it supports the work that they do, but some people are former students who just continue to volunteer because they started volunteering as students and they loved it so much. And a lot of this work relies on volunteers and is empowered by them. So don't think that you have to be like one of me or Greg's students to go volunteer with Move Your Mood or with Spark. Absolutely, or with programs in your community that are relevant, or to get involved. And as you've seen, like, people from a wide variety of backgrounds and positions and organizations come together to make these projects work, and we all lend our areas of expertise and stuff. And I might bring the researcher and the research kind of hat and do that part and try and get my students to do the same, but anyone can get involved where they see a place to get involved with the strengths and the skills that they have to offer to give back in their communities. And I think it'd be great to look around and see where you can get involved, I guess, right? There's Volunteer Central or something people can connect with too. And so if they're interested in the research, message me or Greg. And if they're interested in getting involved in the coalitions, I would connect with Denise or Rania or look at those websites. And there's places where how to get involved and that kind of thing.
Perfect. That's the goal of this podcast, is to kind of provide a medium for people to reach out to, kind of thing. So, All right. Well, thank you very much for tuning in. It sounds like next episode is probably going to be Rania Page doing a deep dive into the 40 developmental assets, because it sounds like we need a full hour to talk about that.
I think you do, yeah.
All right. Stay tuned.
Thanks, Tyler.